MacVoices Magazine, our free Flipboard magazine that brings you some of the best Mac, iPhone, and iPad productivity tips on the web. High in signal, low in noise, just like MacVoices, MacVoices Magazine includes information on how you can get more out of your Apple technology. Subscribe at macvoices.com/magazine or search for MacVoices Magazine on Flipboard. And by the MacVoices Dispatch, our weekly newsletter for MacVoices viewers and listeners. Get the inside scoop on all the MacVoices news by visiting macvoices.com/newsletter to subscribe. Welcome to the MacJury on MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, we have a distinguished panel for this MacJury session on a topic that I've wanted to cover for a long time. It just seems like now is the right time because it's not burning up the headlines at the moment, but it still seems to be on everyone's mind. And frankly, one of the impetus that drove me to this was a comment I got on the YouTube channel about software subscription services. And I thought, okay, now's the right time, so let's dive into it. I can't think of a better group to talk to about this subject. First up, and we're going to work my screen from left to right as always, Mr. Jeff Gamet. Jeff, it's great to have you back as always.
It's always great to be here, and thanks for having me back. Hey. Every single time, I'm always pleasantly surprised.
Well, I'm always delighted that you'll continue to show up. It's for the folks. There's one person out there that doesn't know where you're from or what you do. So for that person,
for that one person, what have you been doing? No, I'm the managing editor at MacObserver, MacObserver.com. And so I'm spending my time writing and talking about anything that's even remotely related to Apple, along with a bunch of other good people. And I'm easy to find. Google me. I'm like on every podcast, it seems.
Yeah, I'm just glad you're on this one. I don't care about the rest.
No, I totally get it.
Yeah, okay. Good to have you. Next up, Mr. Michael E. Cohen. Michael, it's great to have you here. We haven't talked to you in a while.
According to my Skype log, I think it was in June.
Yeah. What are you, slacking? Come on, write a book.
Oh, I might. I've been actually tech editing menu books more recently.
Okay. So what is your claim to fame for that one person that doesn't know Jeff?
Well, I write books for Take Control. I've written a number for them. And in addition, I'm a regular contributor to Tidbits.
And you contribute quite a bit, I think. I do, and I'm looking forward to next week when there will be plenty of stuff to write about. Ooh, do you know something we don't?
Well, it's just, they have their financial statement on Tuesday, and then on Thursday they're going to say hello with some new machines. So
we'll hold you to that second one.
Well, the invitations went out today, if you haven't seen.
Oh, I did not. Okay,
yeah.
Good. Okay, all right, good. Well, it's always good to have you. Looking forward to your insights into the topic. Last but absolutely not least, we haven't talked to him, I don't think, since either right before or right after MacStock, Mr. Mike Potter. Mike, good to have you back. Thanks for coming.
Always an honor to be here, Chuck. And I think it was at MacStock we talked last.
Okay, maybe it was at MacStock. Well, I'm thinking I guess on the show, yeah, we did some taping there too. So, yeah. Have you recovered?
Oh, yeah, I'm completely recovered, and I'm getting ready for next year. So
great. Then that means you'll be back, too, to talk about that.
I hope so. Thank you. All
right, guys. So the topic of subscription software, it seems to be a very polarizing topic. And I don't mind kicking it off a little bit with just some of my general thoughts about it. There was a time I was very much against it, and I think I know why I was very much against it, because I felt like it was forcing things down our throat that we really maybe didn't want or need. It was also potentially creating some issues of compatibility with the operating system, as well as some in-process projects. And then I kind of reversed my position after I started look at the software vendor side and seeing some folks who were pricing their software what I consider reasonably or at least justifiably. And so right at the moment, I kind of sit in the middle. I understand it creates a pretty good cash flow for the developers, but I also know that there's some pieces of software that while I do use them occasionally and enjoy using them occasionally, I can't justify a full-blown subscription for the price that based on an annualized basis. So that's kind of where I stand at the moment. I'm in the middle, but it sort of depends. And so I'm going to go in reverse order. And Mike, I'm going to let you start us out. How do you feel about subscription software?
I'm also, I guess, in the middle on it. I was taking some notes today about the various subscription titles that have been offered to me throughout the years. And I guess the biggest one, the one I have the most issue with, is Adobe's Creative Suite. That is something that I have been a regular, consistent customer of since the 90s, starting with PageMaker and then upgrading to InDesign and eventually switching over to the entire Creative Suite, starting with CS1 and on up to CS6. And I did a little research on what I'd paid throughout the years and compared that. This is what I did. So Adobe Creative Suite CC came out, and Adobe offered me this generous subscription plan of $49 a month, which equates to about $600 a year for me, a sole proprietor business. And I had a little problem with that because the last time I had purchased the upgrade to the Creative Suite, I paid $344.62 in 2012, and before that, $360 in 2011 for CS Suite 5.5. So, even if I add up those two upgrade years and compare it to the cost of one single year of subscribing to CC, I can't cost justify this in any way, shape, or form. And so I've been fortunate that CS6 has continued to run even on Sierra here on this MacBook Pro. And I plan to stick with that as much as I can, while at the same time looking at replacements for the Adobe Creative Suite apps that I use the most, namely Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign. And to be honest, InDesign is the one that kind of throws the real monkey into the wrench here, because I can't just subscribe to the Photoshop plan, which is $20 a month or $10 a month, right? $10 a month, I think that is. I can't just subscribe to that. I have to subscribe to the full $600 a year plan. So thinking about that and thinking about Microsoft Office and thinking about QuickBooks, the three big ones that are out there that folks, that these developers want us to subscribe to, the words that come to my mind are, I just want some parity to what I had been paying before. And I think that's key for me. And in the case of Microsoft Office, I can actually justify that because their $99 a year allows me to load it on up to 5 computers, Mac and Windows alike. And QuickBooks, I can't justify, actually, but their pricing is somewhat fair for the features that they offer compared to the desktop version, which right now looks like they are not going to be upgrading for the Mac anytime soon. So that puts me, I guess, right square in the middle, just as you are. In some cases, I can justify it, and in some cases, I can't. But in the cases I can, it comes down to that word parity to what I had been paying before.
Okay. So we have two in the middle. Michael, are you going to join us in the middle, or do you swing to one end or the other?
I'm pretty much in the middle too, but I think it's also a more complicated issue than it might look on the surface, because subscription is partly to help developers keep going rather than having you to pay periodic upgrade fees and having to design an upgrade program and dealing with people who have to upgrade from 2 versions back and so on. It smooths out their income stream, and it makes it more possible to supply regular incremental updates. And so in that sense, you're subscribing to an always new, always fresh, latest version of the software. And as Mike said, if you can get to parity with what you would have paid before when you were onesie-twoing it, that's fine. But there's also other sorts of subscription that are allowing you to buy into not just a tool like Photoshop, like InDesign, but a library of content and media. And I mean, you go all the way to something that's pure content and media like Apple Music, which is a subscription you pay for. It's $10 a month. And if you like music and you like having all the music you can need, it's a good deal. That's pure content. And then on the other hand, you've got something like Adobe, which is pure tool. And then in the middle, you've got services that do things like provide you with server space and extra material as well as the regular updates. So subscriptions really can vary. But what it comes down to is it worth it to you to pay that regular amount out? In the case of Mike with Adobe, if he thinks I can't pay this much for InDesign and Photoshop every year because it's twice what I was paying before, you'll try to find another way around it. I'm not really dependent upon anything these days because writing is pretty easy. If all you do is write, you get a text editor and you're good to go. Nonetheless, I don't like to subscribe to something that doesn't really promise me regular updates and give me enough bang for the buck that the subscription is worth it. So it really comes down to, judging your market and providing what people need. Here's another monkey wrench to throw into it, and that is the whole idea of how software distribution has changed over the years. Upgrades used to be you'd get a DVD or a stack of floppies back in the old days every time you bought an upgrade. Now you buy them online, and more often they're coming through a store, a curated store like the Apple Store, which doesn't provide for upgrade pricing to begin with. So then you start thinking, well, the only other way to go is a subscription for me to ensure my revenue stream. So, you got that as well going on because nobody's buying boxes of software anymore. They're all buying a stream of bits that come over the Ethernet or Wi-Fi.
Wow.
Sorry, I haven't thought about this much.
No, your points are great. I mean, and it's funny how the subscription for one kind of service, even though it's a computer-related service, I'll categorize it that way, feels so much different than another. And the Apple Music versus Adobe is a perfect example.
Would you rent a car or would you buy one?
Yeah, that
and
too.
The answer is it depends.
Okay, Jeff. So it depends. Michael brought up some really great points. Mike did too. I agree with a lot of what they said. I'm not sure I disagree strongly with anything. Well, maybe there are a couple things. But where do you stand on this?
I'm kind of in the middle, which doesn't help much for creating controversy here.
Yeah.
So the deal is I totally get that developers need to have revenue. If they aren't getting money, then there's no business. And if there's no business, then we don't get the software or software updates that we need. So they need to have a way to get that revenue coming in. And the pay for a static license or a perpetual license and then pay a discount for upgrades later on, that model is clearly going away. Whether you like it or not, that's just the future. So we need to find out what's going to work for us individually. And it's tough. I look at some things where I'm paying for a subscription and I don't bat an eye. Like I pay for Apple Music, I pay for Netflix, I pay for Amazon Prime, I pay for Dropbox. These are all services that I'm not even thinking about how much money. Well, I do think about how much money I'm spending, but I'm not thinking about the fact that these are subscription packages that if I stop paying for them, they go away. I do like that with applications that have been migrating over to the subscription model, that they're finding in many cases other ways to make the cost you're paying more palatable, like with Microsoft and Adobe both offering their online storage that goes along with your subscription. And yes, I totally get that for a lot of people, Creative Suite as a or now the whole Creative Cloud package as a subscription is cost prohibitive, and it sucks, but that's what the market is. And I actually have not subscribed to Creative Cloud. And that's because the features that I really need in Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign are in CS6, which was the last version that was a perpetual license. So I haven't needed to upgrade. When the time comes that those apps break for me, then I'll have to figure out what I'm going to do. And honestly, my guess is that I'm going to switch to Affinity Photo and Affinity Designer. And Affinity is coming out with a PageMaker. Wow, that dates me. Wow. And InDesign.
I put that in your head, though.
Yeah, it's you, man. This is all on you. Anyhow, they're coming out with their page layout application that would be akin to InDesign. And once they've got that out, then there's a relatively low-cost suite out there that has a perpetual license and will do everything that I need now, since I'm not having to do hardly anything as a professional designer anymore. So yeah, it's hard, because what do you do? The other problem that I see with subscription models is that once everything goes to a subscription model, how are we going to afford our software? Because everything will have a subscription. And if there's something that you need like 6 months out of the year, but you have to do an annual subscription, then you've kind of wasted the other 6 months that you've paid. And maybe that's going to keep you from subscribing to another application that you really need. I mean, we all have finite dollars, and we're going to have to start making some tough decisions about which applications we really need and which ones we can do without.
I think part of the problem has to do with the model they're using. A subscription implies you're paying for it month by month by month by month by month. And when you stop, they turn off the faucet. They haven't really, not many people have developed a good way of doing intermittent rentals of software. Whereas if you needed 6 months out of the year, you could rent it for that amount of time for a cost that would be worth it to you and to them, but you wouldn't have it available when you didn't need it. I would like to see Adobe do much better along those lines, because honestly, I use InDesign maybe twice a year. And I can't justify a full year subscription for 2 months or maybe 3 weeks.
Doesn't Adobe offer month to month though?
They do, but it's cumbersome. It's clunky. I did it once for a project earlier, and the amount of crap that you have to load onto your machine just to get the software.
Yeah.
The services and all the stuff that runs in the background and interferes with other processes is really worth it. And then cleaning it out once you no longer need it is a huge investment of time and trouble as well. So they certainly haven't made it convenient for the user, and that's not so much a problem with subscriptions. It's a problem with implementation and respect for their user base.
That's always been a problem for Adobe.
Oh boy, howdy.
Okay, so I want to take the developer side. You need that cash flow. Right, and right now we're talking about Adobe and Microsoft and QuickBooks and some of these large ones. Let's talk about some of our friends over at Smile, who implemented and caused quite a little firestorm with their subscription. And by the way, as a what's the full disclosure, Smile does help sponsor MacVoices. So
here's another full disclosure. I've written 2 sponsored books about Smile software. So. I have a relationship with them as well.
Right. Anybody else want to disclose?
Sure. Chuck, I think you're really cute. No, wait, wrong disclosure.
He is adorable.
I don't have any sponsorship relationships with Smile Software, although I am a very happy text expander user, and I am on the subscription plan.
Okay. Mike?
No disclosures here. I don't use Text Expander. I am a very happy fan of PDFpen Pro. However, I do not subscribe to it. I purchase it outright. They don't have a subscription for that. So, but I don't use Text Expander.
Okay.
So.
All right. So just we have to clear that stuff out. Right now, I am not on the subscription plan for Text Expander, but I am a rabid Text Expander fan, and I think that's one of the reasons that it doesn't bother me. That I plan to go to the subscription plan because I use Text Expander constantly. Now, you can debate as to whether or not their price is quote unquote too high or was too high before they dropped it or any of that. But I find that if I'm a lot more likely to accept a subscription model at whatever price if I honestly use the software. That's the first point. The second point is, and I think this goes to the Creative Cloud stuff, and maybe to, at least for me, to a lesser degree with Microsoft, that they want me to buy a whole lot of stuff. And there are a lot of stuff I don't want. I don't want it on my machine. I don't use it. I don't need it. But that's what they want me to buy primarily. And so they don't give me the choice of, Microsoft doesn't let me just subscribe to Word or Excel, because if they did, there's no way I would ever pay a penny for PowerPoint. Okay, so I'm a Keynote guy, no question. If Adobe would make it a little bit easier for me, I might subscribe to a couple things. As it is, the only thing I subscribe to is Illustrator. And so now, Jeff, I've got to go check out Affinity Designer. So those are a couple places where I guess it punches my buttons. But yeah, to go back to the developer side, they need a cash flow, and I completely get that. And certainly a subscription model makes it a lot easier than them doing the feast or famine thing, where their revenues drop for a year and a half until they bring out a major new revision, and then they hope that revision gets them the money that they need. The other thing, though, forgive me, I'm not sure. Michael, I think you were the one that brought it up about the way software distribution has changed. The operating systems have changed. They get a lot more updates a lot more frequently, and so software has to be maintained arguably a lot more frequently. Because back in the days when it was delivered on floppies and disks, well, that's the way you got your operating systems as well. And so there was sort of a natural barrier to just shoving all those updates out. Now there's no barrier for the OS, and therefore there isn't a barrier for the updates. Mm-hmm. Lastly, there's this dirty little word called security that we all seem to go crazy over if anything seems to be vulnerable at all. We insist that the developer patch it right away, or else risk losing you as a customer. So that's another thing where I might, if I'm a developer, I may have to drop my 25 improvements that I'm hoping to sell you in the next version to go patch the software, for which I get $0. And that's a problem. So both sides, there are a lot of issues here, a lot of moving parts.
Mm-hmm. Can I jump in on the Smile thing real quick?
Oh, of course.
Okay, so here's the deal. I think Smile's problem was that they had really poor communication when they switched into the subscription model, because the pricing that everyone thinks that they dropped down to is the pricing that was already there. That's how poorly they communicated what they were doing, and it really upset a lot of people, and it was a communication thing. I think if companies were better at communicating to their users why they're going to subscription and why they're charging what they are, it would be a much easier pill for people to swallow. And the other side of that is, as users, we tend to arbitrarily assign a dollar value to a product price or a product subscription. And that value that we're assigning is completely independent of what it actually costs to produce the product. So when you're throwing in that means you're throwing in emotion. And once we get into the emotion thing, all bets are off and people freak out. And now we have things like Smile was having to do damage control to convince people that no, they weren't trying to screw anyone over, and no, they weren't trying to gouge anyone with pricing. They just needed to move to this model for this product.
Let me put another little spin on the text expander thing, because what they also did is not just provide a subscription model so you get regular updates. They went to a whole server-based architecture so that all of your text expander assets, your snippets and like that, are stored not just on your machine, but on their server so that they can be shared in a work group. So they were looking partly towards a pro user for that, but in addition, they're providing a service beyond what a standalone piece of software ordinarily would. They also talked about and are still hoping to develop a community of users who would share important snippets and useful things and build out whole libraries of content. So then it becomes a subscription that's not just a tool, but a content source as well, and a communication source as well, because you can build these work groups with very complex sets of snippets that are used for different tasks and like that. The problem that they had is that they needed to build the infrastructure first before they could go out and do all the other things that this infrastructure will let them do. But you had to pay the cost at the beginning, and they communicated very poorly about that. You're partly buying a promise for the future, for the future of where they see their product going. And if it all plays out well, it will be a much cooler tool than it is already. But we're at the early stages of it, and right now it looks like, why did they do this?
Well, and at some point, maybe it is an investment in the future, or it's an investment in keeping them going now.
There's also that as well. Absolutely.
I mean,
I love those people dearly. They're some of the nicest people I've ever worked with. So I want them to succeed at this.
Sure. And, I want people to pay for software. I mean, I've spent more time around the developer community in probably the last 4 or 5 years than I've ever spent before. And you learn a lot of things. The first thing you learn is that this developer is really passionate about this product. And we go to the front page of the App Store, Mac or iOS, look at something and say, not interested, and move on. Something that somebody spent hundreds, if not thousands of hours on, and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and we dismiss it easily. And so, if it's something that I'm interested in, then I want to pay that developer because I want him to keep it going, and I want him to do more cool stuff. Mike, you were citing your purchase history with the Creative Suite, not the cloud, but the suite.
Yeah.
And my history's not good enough on exactly how far apart those releases were. Were you one that was upgrading every time the Creative Suite did a number upgrade, or did you skip a couple upgrades?
I usually upgraded every time.
Okay.
And that I was actually surprised when I went back and saw that the difference in time between Creative Suite 5.5 and Creative Suite 6 was just about a year. That was the May 2011 and May 2012. But just to go back to something you mentioned a moment ago, I don't want it to sound like I'm completely opposed to subscriptions, because as you were talking about this, I realized I do subscribe to a number of developer tools that I use when I work on client websites and things like that. And in order to get those updates that are released on a continual basis, and most of these are smaller developers, they're not the Adobes and Microsofts and whatnot. In order to get these updates, you subscribe to their package and you renew on an annual basis. And I'm perfectly happy to do that for two reasons. One, I'm supporting the smaller developer, but two, I know that in the event that I don't or I can't renew in the next year, or I stop using their tool, the instances where I did use their tool will not stop working. They will continue to exist as they did at the point I stopped the subscription. And I was a little curious to find out if Text Expander, if the local app on the Mac continues to work if you no longer subscribe to the service, unlike Office and unlike the Creative Suite that stopped working entirely when you stopped the subscription. I think something I would like is if Adobe or Microsoft said, hey, you know what? You can subscribe for as long as you want to, and we'll give you updates for as long as you want to. But when you stop the subscription, you can just keep the software at that point, whenever you stopped it, and then pick it up again 6 months later or 2 years later if you want to get the latest updates.
I totally get why they'll never do that.
Agreed.
It's because everyone will sign up for 1 month and then unsubscribe and then just keep using the app for 3 years.
Unless they put a minimum on it, you subscribe for 12 months after a certain amount of time.
and then they still have no revenue for 2 more years.
And also, you don't have a piece of software that you can guarantee will work with the next version of the Mac OS that comes out.
No, but I can
I don't
guarantee
think
that
that's a
Affinity
big
Photo will
concern
work.
for a lot of people.
Well, Affinity Photo right now has, I mean, I haven't talked to Affinity yet, but their model is the perpetual license model.
It's a perpetual license. My point is that Adobe is getting zero revenue stream from me right now as it is. And they're not going to get any revenue stream from me under their current model. So I'm looking and am actively switching to the Affinity products. And I am interested, by the way, in the new designer that they have coming out. I'm really excited to see that. But in the meantime, I revived, I brought back to life my Quark license. The last time I purchased a copy of Quark was in 2001. 2015 came out with a free upgrade to 2016. Where do you think I spent my money? I spent it on that instead of $600 on the Creative Suite. So I'm going back to perpetual license models for the apps that I can support it with. And I'm sticking with subscriptions for those that, I couldn't otherwise continue to do it if it switched to perpetual, like the development tools that I use.
Okay, so let me put on my Adobe hat and say that
what an oddly shaped hat that is.
The Creative Cloud is not for us. Well, Jeff maybe, Mike maybe, because you're both professionals.
Yeah. I mean, realistically, I should be using Creative Cloud, but I'm getting by just fine without it for now.
Okay, but where I was going with that, Jeff, and that's a really interesting comment, because Creative Cloud, Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, they've always been postured as the professional level tools. And I mean like the real professionals, not those of us that want to believe we're professionals in those areas, but the real professionals that do, that do 27-step things to make a circle look good. I mean,
you get paid for it every single day using that tool.
In every single project, right. Exactly. So are we just whining about something that we would like to say that we have access to those tools, even though we might use only 5, 10, 15, 20% of them?
I wouldn't say whining. And in fact, I'd say that what they have actually done is begun to eat their seed corn, in the sense that it used to be if you were a student, you could get a nicely discounted Photoshop or Illustrator as a student and learn how to use it. And then, in the hopes you would go on and continue to use it. And you could see if you had what it took to become a professional. Now, the buy-in is actually too high to just do the screwing around that any novice does when they start out using a new tool in a new art or a new craft. So, in a sense, by marketing it only for already existing professionals, we're the people who are going to be the next wave of professionals going to get access to that tool.
Yeah, the academic price is a little less than half on this.
Yeah, is that low enough? Because I know students,
well, actually, I bought into it as a student. That's how I got into PageMaker, was the student edition, and it was very, very well priced. I think it was about $100 when I bought it. That's in the late 80s, early 90s, something like that. And so that made it very palatable to me. And I continued to upgrade as a student. And I think the highest price I ever paid as a student was $150, something like that. But then when I graduated and I moved on to professional careers, I bought into the full suite. And they did generously allow me to upgrade at that time. So that was nice as well.
Does Adobe have that's news to me. They have a student pricing for Creative Cloud?
They do.
Okay, good. Mm-hmm. Okay.
I don't think it's really necessary for Adobe to have a pricing structure that's different than what it is for students right now, because they're in the position, at least for today, where if you're going to be a professional designer, professional photographer, and any of those creative jobs that involves putting professional legitimately in front of your name, well, that's what you have to use. That's it. That's just what it is. So you end up having to get the tools, whether you like to pay the price or not.
Well, that's an important point, because I look at books that students have to buy, and the price for many textbooks is outrageous. A typical textbook might cost $100, $150 or more for something that's shoddily printed, not well proofread, and pushed out, but it's an academic book, so they can do that.
Yeah, and that's horrible. I think that's a horrible travesty that students are put in that position.
So to pay high-end prices for a tool is not out of line with what they're already paying for books. That's the point that I'm really getting at.
Yeah. I kind of wish Adobe was still doing what they did in the early days when they really needed to push their products out on people. And you could get like you'd buy a scanner and it came bundled with Photoshop. And
Photoshop LE.
But it was still Photoshop. And so it got you into the Adobe door, and all you had to do was spend, at the time, it would have been like $120 on a scanner, and you're good to go. And and then it was to the point where it felt like if you went to Taco Bell and bought a 6-pack of tacos, it came with a free copy of InDesign or Photoshop. And and it was great because, man, they got everyone in, they got everyone hooked. They don't have to do that anymore because those are the tools you use. So they cost what they cost, and I'm sure to some degree, they're of course there's always they have to pad in profit because they're a business. But my guess is that the prices they're charging are based on what they expect to have for a user base and what they need to show as a profit, and then also what they need to recoup for the costs of creating and supporting all of these applications.
Development.
Yeah, it's not cheap. I mean, if you look at the number of people that Adobe needs to have to work on any given product, I mean, it's crazy. They have an army of engineers coding all the time, and they've created products that are so complex that there's no one person at Adobe that truly 100% completely knows any product. Their stuff is just that complex now.
And it's
it's kind of expensive because of it.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing, Jeff, because Adobe has gone down that path. Microsoft has taken a little bit different path with their software because they keep adding things on and adding things on. Legacy code, and that comes with its own set of problems. So Adobe, I think, does a pretty good job, as far as I know, of adding, honest to God, adding new features. That now, whether they're features any of us use or whether they're just for the the absolute high-end designers, but they do bring out different things, and I give them credit. Microsoft, I'm not so sure that they're bringing out features that anybody cares about. And I mean, are there really new features? I mean, yeah, okay. There's what, OneNote, which is a new product,
which is actually pretty awesome.
I've heard that. There is the Microsoft Cloud, which that's a whole other discussion. But where are the new features in Excel and Word that mere mortals are using?
I can process words so much better now in Office 2016 than I could in Office 97. I'm just going to tell you that right now, Chuck. It's so much easier to type. No, it's not. It's completely the same.
For a second, I was buying into it, Mike.
Microsoft is Adobe is going to find themselves in the position that Microsoft is in right now, where there are a number of competing suites, including Apple's own Pages, but a number of competing suites out there, different applications that anyone as a writer can use and get those words processed just as well as they could in Microsoft Office. And I think that Adobe is going to find the same thing as companies like Serif come along with Affinity Photo and Affinity Designer, and you've got Smith Micro out there with their manga development studios and things like that. A lot of professionals are shifting over to competitive packages, and they're packages that don't cost as much as the Adobe Suite. And I think that they're going to find that students are going to begin doing that as well. If I can buy Affinity Photo and it opens up a Photoshop document, gives me the same layers, allows me to work with it the same way I could work with it in Photoshop, and then spit out a Photoshop document, why do I need a basic Photoshop? I don't.
Actually, the one thing that's happening because of the reconfiguration of how developers are charging for their products now, subscriptions and the like, it's also forcing them to decide who their customer base is.
Yeah, true.
And,
Yes.
at one time, the consumer base was big and the professional base was not so big. But over time, they found that they could make a lot of money selling to that professional base more than they could pursuing the consumer market. And they shifted that way. And I think Adobe has done that quite a bit with their suite. I think Microsoft has always been more of a business tool than a consumer tool. And they've tried to straddle that divide, but, it's made their product schizophrenic as a result. But I think, more and more towards subscription, they may start saying, well, we're going to provide this package for this audience and not that audience. They're already doing it in a lot of ways.
You just totally made it crystal clear for me what it is that has us all so upset. We're angry because Adobe is breaking up with us.
That's right. They don't love us anymore. We loved you. We put you through medical school, and now you're leaving us for that waitress?
Yeah.
But no, you're right. You're absolutely right. There's a real emotional component to it.
Here's one thing that Microsoft and Intuit are doing differently than Adobe. They're still selling a standalone perpetual license for those who want it. Would I continue to buy into the Creative Suite if it was offered as a perpetual license that I wasn't locked into this churn of $600 a year? Absolutely, I would buy it. And they would continue to get that revenue stream for me, whether they wanted it or not. But that's something that Adobe has decided they're not going to do. And I kind of wish that they would. Instead, I look at other products.
Yeah, it would be cool. I just don't see Adobe doing that.
No, it's not going to happen.
When Adobe was looking at making the transition to the subscription Creative Cloud, they did some serious number crunching. And when I was talking with Adobe people about what they were doing, they were very matter of fact, and they said, look, we're looking at how people are using and buying and upgrading our products. And what they found is that you'd buy a version and then you'd skip the next version or the next two. But, just for sake of argument, we'll say you skipped a version. So they had part of their user base upgrading for one version, then the other part upgrading for the next version, then the first group upgrading for the next version. And so they were doing this leapfrog thing all the time. And it was it made it really difficult to keep the revenue stream going the way they needed it to. And it also made it difficult to support products.
Absolutely.
And I think that's been a big thing for companies that are going to subscription model. It makes it much easier for them to offer product support. And I know it sounds like I'm totally defending Adobe right now. I'm not. It's just this is what they were passing on to me.
Oh, they're excellent points.
Yeah.
No, the support is a huge cost to developers. I used to work at Symantec, and I know how a big software company pays for support and pays for user communications, pays for documentation and everything else. And it is an enormous cost that they don't really recoup once they sell a package on a perpetual license.
And I don't want anyone to think that we're attacking anyone unless we specifically say we're attacking them. We're trying to take both sides of it. And I will defend Adobe in this, that at least as far as Photoshop goes, they do publish Photoshop Elements, which is a standalone perpetual license. It's pretty powerful piece of software. It doesn't have everything that Photoshop has in it, but it has a lot. And to their credit, each time a new version comes out, it feels like there are real updates to it that are usable by its audience, not pie in the sky things. So they're doing a good job with that. I wish they had an option to do that with some of their other tools, but they have not done so far.
Chuck, the Photoshop Elements thing, there's so much in there that most I would speculate that about 95% of the people that are using regular Photoshop would be better served by buying a perpetual license to the Photoshop elements, because it's going to do every single thing they need. They just have this psychological thing that says, well, I have to have regular Photoshop, otherwise I don't have the tools I need.
I think we may have just said something about, why a lot of us feel like we want Mac Pros, but really a nice iMac is just fine. But that too is a whole nother discussion, because we all want to feel like we're up here and boy, we need the best and we deserve the best and all this, when in fact what we really need is somewhere right about here, and the rest is just our ego. Mike, I want to go back to one thing you said, and I'm about to. I realize, folks, how crazy this sounds, but I'll throw it out there. If there was a way to cut the subscription cost down by a third and buy a maintenance license, so that let's say you have, I don't know, you have Creative Cloud 10, and I freeze myself a Creative Cloud 10. I don't want any new features. I've got everything that I need. The only thing I need is Adobe to make sure that it continues to run on Sierra and on the next version and the next version and the next version. Would you be willing to pay something to have that option?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think what you're describing, though, is perpetual licenses.
Well, no.
Yep.
We'll say, okay, maybe we need to define perpetual and subscription. I see subscription as Adobe telling me to sign up, and they're going to constantly push me new features and updates, and it's going to be wonderful. I see Microsoft kind of doing the same thing, that if I subscribe to 365, I get their new updates and their upgrades and everything. Back to Smile, same thing. I'm subscribing because I'm getting regular updates to their software. And to Michael's point, I'm investing in the future a little bit, but I don't have to wait 6 months, 8 months for them to fix a bug. I'm constantly getting that stream. But what if I could just say, okay, I'm stopping at this version for right now, and I want my payment to go way down, but I will pay you a small stream to make sure that you will keep this upgraded. Or, updated as far as a compatibility thing goes with the OS. I know what a nightmare.
Oh, I see. A lesser cost license for not necessarily being on the cutting edge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to add in not just running with the next OS, but also security patches. But
yeah. Okay.
Right.
Good point. So, I mean, would that make it more palatable to all of us, you think?
Because to a lot of us, it would. I think that, again, right now we're in the early stages of it in the software economic picture, and people are still trying out different models, and they're basing them on real world models in some sense, with actual physical goods, where you'll rent a tractor or a backhoe, or you'll lease one for a year or something like that. But they haven't really looked at the many ways in which they could get a revenue stream, different kinds of revenue streams from different classes of users. That's a more complex issue for the marketing people and sales people and the executives to figure out. And everybody wants things to be simple, but if they want to go for a broad-based consumer market, they have to look at different populations and different ways their products are being used and come up with different models for those different groups. And they haven't done it yet. They've said, this is a professional license, take it or leave it. Adobe, at least, has done that. And in a sense, Microsoft has too. But they haven't really looked at, tailoring their packages for very different groups of people and very different use cases. It's complicated.
Maybe a more cost-effective a la carte plan. So one of you, I think it was you, Chuck, who mentioned buying the apps individually. And you can do that. You can subscribe to InDesign, you can subscribe to Illustrator, you can subscribe to Photoshop, and et cetera, et cetera. And Photoshop is $9.99 a month, and that includes Lightroom. And then the others are $19.99 a month. So if I were to subscribe to only the apps that I needed, I would be paying $240 more per year than I would be with the regular plan. So I don't want all that stuff. I think Michael said this. I think Jeff said this. All this extra junk that gets loaded on the computer when you put on the Creative Suite. I don't need all that. I don't need Premiere. I just need these 4 applications. But it's not cost effective for me to only get these 4 applications. I have to get the whole suite. So
you have to make more money.
I have to make more money.
All right. So here's something I found to be very interesting. We're all saying, I don't need this, I don't need this. And we know what tools we need to do our jobs because we're really good at that. But I have talked to many people who have said, look, I need to do this one thing. I need to make this audio file, but I don't know how to do it. And I say, well, you have Creative Cloud, right? Yes. Okay, well, you can download Premiere. You can download, I just forgot the audio file thing. But Audition, thank you. I tell them, these tools are there. You're already paying for them. So download this tool. And then they're really excited because they had no idea that this tool that was going to be very helpful for what it is they need to do now was already available to them. So, I mean, it is cool that there's all of this software that's available under that one subscription package. But the other side is, yeah, most people don't need all of the apps. And the cost is higher than the casual user wants to pay, and in some cases, what the professional user can afford to pay.
Whatever happened to micropayments, where you'd be able to rent or get a software for a few hours or a couple days?
I think Getty totally screwed that for us.
Elaborate, please.
All right, so micropayments, that's something that Getty, the stock photography company, was really pushing, and after they bought Shutterstock, is that right? No, iStock Photo.
Yeah, iStock.
Is that the one they bought?
Yeah,
I think it was iStock. Yeah. Anyhow, after they bought that company, they really started playing with the whole micropayment thing, and I think they did it wrong, and they really messed up the pricing. And all of a sudden, something that should be relatively cheap because we're doing micropayments became this prohibitively expensive image. And I think Getty really turned professionals off of micropayments, and it became a thing that other companies just didn't want to do because professional consumers were already pissed off. And that's my theory.
Well, and micropayments, I'm sure, would create a bit of a support nightmare because if something happened with software that you've rented for 2 hours and you decide you need 4 hours worth of support to try to make it do what you want to do, well, that's losing money at a really big rate. So there are definitely pitfalls there. But I think there's some opportunities there as well if people would think outside the box a little.
They would. They have to have the will, and they have to have enough people in-house who already at least have a glimpse of where they're trying to go to start implementing it before they build up a whole engineering suite, which is what they'd have to do in their offices to build out a good micropayments plan that would work with accounting, that would work with sales, that would work with their products as they have them. There are a lot of little moving parts there, so that's an actual incurred cost that they'd have to pay for. It's hard for a small developer to do it. Adobe could afford to. Microsoft could afford to.
But I would love to find a solution and we're not smart enough to do it, guys, unfortunately. But I'd love to find a solution that could be applicable to everyone. I mean, right now we've discussed a lot of Adobe and Microsoft. We've discussed some Smile. I think by starting out, Michael, you named off a bunch of services that are subscription services that we don't always think about as subscription services.
Because they provide content.
Well, they provide content. They provide something. For me, they provide something I use every day. And that to me is one of the big keys of what I would be willing to pay a subscription for, is if I used something on a pretty regular basis. The trouble is that the number of software packages that I use in a day every day or just say pretty regularly, outside of the production of these kind of shows, probably about 5, 6, 7 maybe, but I have a whole pile of apps on my iOS devices and my Macs that I access on a lot less regular basis. Those are the ones I'm kind of worried about, because where do they go? Because they don't have a place in my life, or by their very nature, they don't have a place in anybody's life like the Creative Suite might, or like Microsoft, the Office suite for Microsoft does. So how do we do that? Text Expander, Smile? Yeah, Text Expander I use constantly, multiple times an hour. So I have no problem with that. But where does somebody go that Jeff, help me out. What's something that you use maybe once a week? Only once a week. Can you think of anything?
Man, the stuff that I use, I really use Illustrator. I use Illustrator maybe once a week.
Okay, that's interesting. Of all things.
Yeah, Photoshop is running like almost all the time, but yeah, Illustrator I just need occasionally.
Okay. I don't know. I wanted to talk about this because I don't think there are any answers, but there are a lot of questions, and I hate to see someone say, "Well, I'm leaving Adobe or Microsoft or Smile or anybody else because they went to subscription, and I want to be just able to decide when I upgrade and all that." Well, we saw plenty of companies go out of business because they couldn't get upgrades out fast enough, and they couldn't sell at today's prices adequately to make money to keep going. So, what do you do, folks? Let us hear from you. If you have ideas, and developers, this is a formal invitation to developers who'd like to come on the show to discuss this, because I would love to hear, because I'm sure that you have perspectives on it we haven't touched on, but I think we all need to kind of huddle together and figure this out. Any parting words of wisdom, gentlemen? Wow, nothing.
We didn't even get into the subscriptions that go along with other products,
such as
like the Nest Cam. That's basically a worthless product unless you also pay for subscription. Stuff like that leaves a bad taste in people's mouths. Where you've already spent $150 on something and then find out now you have to spend every single month to actually get the value out of it that you're expecting. That doesn't help subscription models at all.
No, it doesn't.
That's a great point.
It doesn't unless you're talking about one of these things, in which case you do pay a subscription plan to get the most out of it.
Right, but you have a real value in it, just right out of the box. And there's also a different mindset with your phone versus a webcam to make sure that no one's breaking into your house.
Comes down to the fact that it really depends on the product and the user base for that product as to how well subscription plans will work and how they will evolve and how they will be presented to the customer base.
Yeah, I think you said a mouthful.
It's one of those ugly things. Oh gosh, it depends.
Well, I think about
that's why I'm in the middle.
I think about my cable subscription, and I've told folks on the show before, that I have the bottom level Comcast that I can possibly buy, which means I get the major networks, I get public TV, and I probably 25 shopping channels. Gee, I wonder why. And yet, okay, I can watch TV with that limited selection, but I can watch TV 24/7 all month for the price I paid for the month. Or I can turn it on for an hour tonight to watch something, and I can turn it on for 30 minutes in the morning to watch the Today Show as I get dressed. And that's it. It depends on how much value I take out of that subscription. And I think that may come full circle back to the Adobe thing, that if you use it all the time, maybe it's worth it. But if you don't, a premium subscription for cable TV is definitely not worth it to me because I don't watch that much TV. But it's worth it enough for me to have local channels and those a few things that I do watch to pay for what I pay for.
No, you're absolutely right. If I could recoup the investment in that on a daily basis, you're right. I wouldn't think about it. I wouldn't have to think about it. Unfortunately, that's not the case for me.
I feel like we got to come back and continue this at some point, guys, because it's a developing thing. And as Jeff said, there are a lot of things we didn't even touch on with examples. Although, Michael, I think you said something about renting cars.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wanted to make the point that in the case of a leased car, a lot of times at the end of the lease, you have the option to buy.
Exactly. We don't quite have that with software yet, where the lease becomes a perpetual license at the end of the term. Meanwhile, the iPhone started to be sold like leased cars. It's begun to go to a complete subscription model, whereas you buy into Apple's plan, you get a new phone every year by paying this regular monthly fee.
Yep, right up to the end, when then you have to pay the whole thing off if you decide to move.
If you decide to move, but if you get on that train and stay on the train, you're renting your phone in perpetuity, but it's always a new phone.
Oh my.
And that's exactly the plan I'm on. And for now, I think it's pretty awesome.
And I'm with you, Jeff. I'm doing the same thing because it's important to both of us to have the latest and greatest for work as well as otherwise.
Yep. And if that ever changes, then I'll just write out the payments until they're done. My bill goes down and I've got a phone.
Yep. Guys, we will continue this at a later date with more information and more examples, because this has been a terrific discussion. But I definitely want to go around the table and make sure everyone knows where they can find you when you're not here, sharing all this wisdom. And there's been a lot of wisdom shared. Mike, let's go the other direction. Let's start with you. Where can folks find you when you're not here?
I can be found at formaceyenonly.com. That's where I produce the podcast for Mac Eyes Only. And then I'm also about to go into the third year of MacStock, which folks can find that at macstock2017.com. Not a whole lot of info on next year's conference yet, but it should be there pretty soon.
Great. I know I'm already looking forward to it. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Michael?
Well, you can find me regularly on the virtual pages of Tidbits at tidbits.com. And if you go to takecontrolbooks.com, you can find my books.
Good. And where might we find you on Twitter or Facebook? Or
You can find me on Twitter as LYMOND, Lymond. That's the name I use for historical reasons. And those who understand will understand, and those who don't won't.
It's not an alias or anything. You weren't in trouble at any time.
No, it's a character in a series of novels by a woman named Dorothy Dunnett that were written during the 60s that are very interesting if you like big historical novels.
Okay. You always have a twist, Michael. Thanks for being here. Mr. Gamet, I know where to find you, but how about the rest of the world? Where all can we find you?
You can find me over at macobserver.com, and you can find me on Twitter and Instagram. I'm J Gamet there, or both places. And at Fresh Brewed Tales, where I write about the ridiculous things I see people do in coffee shops. And and I've been so busy lately, I haven't been able to write anything for Fresh Brewed Tales. I'm sorry, people. But I have a few wonderful stories that need to get written and drawings to go with them. So don't worry, there'll be new stuff soon.
I love it.
Yes. Should we ask you just to hit your regular podcast appearances, the ones that you host and the ones that you participate in?
Sure. Monday through Friday, Mac Observer's Daily Observations. Every Wednesday, Apple Context Machine. I do that with Brian Chaffin. On Saturdays, I do the iOS show with Michael Johnston and Adam Christensen. And then most Thursdays, I'll be on The Big Show, which is from the British Tech Network, out of our friends over the United Kingdom. And then other places, too.
Is that all?
That's enough for now.
Okay. All right. Jeff, thanks a lot for being here.
It's always awesome. Thank you.
Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is the MacJury on MacVoices. I hope that we've given you some things to think about. And again, I would love to hear from you. Chuck at MacVoices.com. I'm on Twitter as Chuck Joyner, also as MacVoices. So any way you want to find me, please do, and let me know what you think. Until the next time, and as always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes, links to subscribe, and to connect with Chuck on Twitter, Google+, Facebook, YouTube, Vimeo, SoundCloud, the MacVoices blog, the MacVoices Dispatch, our weekly newsletter, and on MacVoices magazine, free on Flipboard that helps you do more with your Apple tech. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.